we get started, I have had apologies from councillors Tony Cox, who might join online. Councillor Diani is running a little bit late, and Councillor Wilkie sends her apologies. Are there any? Substitute. Councillor Whitelow is subbing for Councillor Adeleke. I think that's it in terms of those. There is no public participation tonight apart from Ron. Minutes. Did anyone have anything on the minutes from the last meeting that stood out that needed to be changed, or can we confirm the minutes from the last meeting as accurate?
Could I just ask that there be some checking on some of the spelling in that report, in the minutes, please? There's councillors' names that have been incorrectly spelt, and there's a refereed instead of a referred. There's some other issues as well, but I'm sure if you go through it, you'll spot them. No problem.
Do you want specific sent over, or
not unless there's anything specifically someone wants to change, but I'd go for it.
So once that's been done, is that?
Yeah, it just reads poorly because it picked up the words are spelled correctly, but it's the wrong word.
It was a good autocorrect, yeah.
And the councillor's name is incorrectly spelled.
Are there any declarations of interest tonight? No matters referred to the committee in relation to call-in. We'll move on to agenda item 6, which is the Q2 budget monitoring.
Thank you. So the report before you gives an overview of the council's financial performance as at Q2, so that's the end of September 2023. There's a specific focus on the services that fall within the remit of this overview and scrutiny committee. In terms of the headline position for the council, overall on our general fund services, we're reporting a surplus of around 540k. And of this, there are pressures against housing and community services of 142k. That's largely driven by a shortfall of rental income within the service from garages. In terms of the housing revenue account, we're reporting a pressure of around 370k. There's a number of different over pressures and surpluses that are driving that, but a significant cost is the repairs and maintenance cost that's been experienced by the housing landlord function. And this is being offset by additional income that's coming in from the investment of the council's cash balances. On the capital side of things, for the Housing and Communities General Fund Capital Programme, we've got around 100k underspend, and then also rephasing of capital activity to future years of around £500,000. And on the housing revenue account side of the capital programme, it's generally forecast to be on budget for the year, and with rephasing of capital activity of about £4.5 million to future years. So lots of detail in the report, and I'm happy to take questions on it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions to start? Councillor Barrow.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is sort of more a general finance question, so it's been covered before. Section 4.2 of the report, you talk about surplus generated because of income from the Old Town Hall. What happens with that? Is it sort of reinvested into that area, or does it go off to fund other council functions?
So it's really just taken to support the overall bottom line of the council. It's not specifically earmarked for the Old Town Hall. If there is an overall surplus on the general fund, which is what the Old Town Hall is part of, say at the end of the year, then that would be a decision for members as to what they wish to do with that. So often our recommendation is to put it to reserves in order to fund specific pieces of activity going forward, but that very much becomes a decision for members, and generally one that's taken at the end of the financial year when we know the overall financial position for the council. But it's not generally earmarked for a particular service automatically.
Councillor Whitelow.
Thank you. Forgive me, because it's my first time on this committee for a long time, but it's about the same area that Councillor Barrow was highlighting. I think I noted somewhere in the reports that the reason for the surplus is that in fact we are having difficulty recruiting. Is that correct?
So there are, within the Place Directorate, and I think that's what you're referring to, there have been some vacancies during the year, particularly at senior management level. I'm aware that a recruitment process is underway for some of those roles, and I'm not sure of the exact outcome of those, but I understand there has been some success in that area. So I believe the position is changing on that front.
Now, what impact the lack of that senior management has had on the operations of the Opt Hub?
So there isn't anyone here from that particular service, but just generally, I know that the duties of those posts have been taken on by the Assistant Director for that service, so they have been covering those vacancies, which I think have generally been ahead of service level. So I'm not aware of any sort of adverse impact in terms of delivery, because I believe those duties have been undertaken by other members of the corporate leadership team.
So if that is the case, then those duties have been absorbed by other members of the senior team. Do we in fact need to replace them? Replace the person, the missing officer?
It's a fair question to ask. Again, I wouldn't want to sort of put words into the mouth of the representatives from that service, but I would say that cover wouldn't be a sustainable position going forward. So we've been able to do that in the short term, but I think longer term, to ensure that we've got the level of service that we want going forward, we would need those posts filled.
Thank you.
If it helps, Chair, I'm aware there's also interim cover in place in that service area externally, supporting the Assistant Director whilst the recruitment process is underway, following the restructure in the Place Directorate, and I'm also aware that 2 out of the 3 posts being recruited to have been successfully appointed to.
Thank you.
Any questions on this agenda item?
That's okay, thank you. On the HRA capital budget, section 10.3, last quarter I asked a question on that and on the overall review of the housing development project that the council were undertaking. I wondered if you had an update on that and when we could expect to hear more in committee about the review.
It's around the new build development.
It's around in quarter 1, there was a bit in the slippage section that mentioned that the housing development building projects have been paused and put on review because of issues in the budget, in the budgetary system, and that we could expect a broad review that was happening, and that would come to committee and to members in due course. So I wondered if you had an update on that, or we could expect to hear more.
Shall I just make a few comments on that? So the council's new build programme budget is reviewed annually through the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan, which is the long-term financial plan for the housing service. And that Housing Revenue Account Business Plan refresh is coming to the next scrutiny meeting. So we'll be able to share some details with you around what that means for the new build programme. At the moment, the figures previously agreed by the council, which are circa 100 million for council new build, are within the business plan that we will be presenting to you. All schemes are on site. There was one scheme that was previously in the programme which fell through because it was undeliverable, but all other schemes are currently progressing.
You got a follow-up, Councillor Barrow?
One second.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so it was specifically around, so last quarter, the report said that the housing development programme is being reviewed, and Cherry Bounce and garage sites are being put on hold while options and assessments are considered. That was what my question was around. So are those projects still on hold?
Those are new schemes which aren't in the current programme.
Okay.
So they will be reviewed as part of the development of the future programme. So they're not currently in our in the programme that we're working to at the moment. They are potential future schemes. When they're worked up in detail, there will then be a recommendation that will come through to members to incorporate them in the programme.
Okay, thank you.
That's all the questions on this item. I think we can take that item as noted. And then we'll move on to the next one of quarter 2 housing report. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Chair. So the purpose of this report is really to provide you with an overview of the housing services performance at quarter 2. Quite a lengthy report. You've got several appendices attached, which include our compliance position, our position in terms of tenant satisfaction measures, and our overall performance. Be fair to say there's certainly some challenges around repairs and complaints that we're tackling head on. and that certainly features as part of our high risk areas. So your report does set out areas of risk, areas of challenge. It also lists some highlights and some achievements of the team, and happy to sort of take any questions.
If I can start with a question, I did see that is it one property isn't gas safety approved? Is there a particular reason for that one property? I'm assuming it's a historical thing. So obviously it is a red because it is a high risk, but obviously one out of however many isn't red when you really think about it.
So I'm going to defer that question, if I can, Chair, to Mark. It's his area of service. Mark, are you able to respond to that one?
Thanks. Thanks, Councillor. Just to give you some assurance, what we report is the actual number at the end of the month, the end of the quarter. So, for example, we could have a property that's out of compliance when we do the reporting, but within the following couple of days or the following week, it would have been made compliant. So the number of properties that compliance are circa of 9,000 gas properties. So we do have one, and the reason why we record it as a red rather than anything else is because when it comes to gas, it's either compliant or it isn't. And I think that's the approach that's been endorsed across the sector, really, is that if you're not compliant, you record it as not compliance. There are other authorities and our housing associations that report it differently. For example, if they've made attempts to get in and they've had refusals, they address that as a compliant property. But in my view, and the recognised view of the sector is, if you've got a CP12, which is the gas certificate, then it's recorded as compliant. If it isn't, you don't record it. So we can have at any one time between 1 and 5 is the normal for decorum. Most months we're actually hitting 100%, but it can fluctuate depending on the access issues, and we do have some challenges with regards to some access issues, but we do have legal legislation to support access into these properties, so we are maintaining really good performance on that.
Brilliant, thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions on this item? Councillor Whitelow.
I have a question. It's a comment. I noticed at the start of this report it does refer to the glossary of acronyms. I couldn't find one, and I'm just thinking that this is a public document that we're putting on our website to enable the public, our residents, to look at what we are, what's going on in the council, and we really ought to make it as clear as possible for them. I mean, again, most of these terms don't mean anything to me because I'm not usually on this committee, but I'm sure many members of the public would be in the same position as I am. Have I missed it?
No, that's a fair comment, and we'll rectify that for next time.
Thank you.
No, these things are easily missed. I can imagine when you're typing a whole report, thank you.
Our world is full of acronyms. So
Yes.
absolutely.
Sometimes it's hard to know which ones you need to actually say about. Any other questions or comments on this report? We take it as,
So I'm trying to find it, the house mark scores. So it says, my computer's gone balmy. Am I on the right report? The housing report?
yeah.
Sorry, you know how you suddenly have a wobble that I'm looking at the wrong report. On page 18, it talks about the complaints and repairs comparisons being poor. And obviously, if you jump to the house mark report, complaints in particular are very poor. I just wondered what action was being taken to improve that, because obviously complaints is a big issue within the council, and it's way off the mark.
Yeah, you're correct. It is a big issue, and it's got a lot of focus from us at the moment in the leadership team. We've recently changed our process and how we're responding to stage 1 and stage 2 complaints to make sure that we're addressing the complaints that are coming in, and individual services are looking at action plans around the complaints that we are getting to make sure that the service is responding to those complaints, looking for themes so that we can get an improvement.
Is there a sort of stepped performance indicator that you're aiming for? Because as I say, it's quite low at the moment, and it's clearly got quite a long way to go to get to the lower median figure. Sorry, the lower quartile figure. Is there a step program, or is it just throwing sort of resources and ideas at it to improve it?
I think the intention is that we are working towards 100% compliance. There are some performance challenges that are being led by all ladies, predominantly myself and Mark now, who is on the screen. As David mentioned, our weekly DMT meeting focuses on the scrutiny of complaints. And up until a fortnight ago, stage 2 escalation complaints were actually being led across the wider corporate leadership team. So they were apportioned out across all heads of service. There's been a revision to that process, as David touches on, which brings those complaints back within the housing and property directorate specifically, and includes allocation not just to heads of service but also to assistant directors. Some of the challenge around compliance was due to the nature of the complaints and the length of the investigation, and some of the findings around that where they're allocated to individuals who perhaps have less knowledge of the housing and property service activity. That can lead to an awful lot of learning whilst also undertaking the complaint investigation, which makes the process more lengthy. So it's felt that bringing it back within the service enables closer scrutiny, as David touches on, enables us to ensure that we're embedding learning and aligning with the Housemark and forthcoming tenant satisfaction measure requirements around this area.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any more questions on this agenda item? Councillor Pesh, do you have any from your side? Okay. No? Okay, thank you. Take the reports noted. We'll move on to the agenda item 8, which is damp and mould policy. It's back to you.
Back to Mark.
Back to Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for the opportunity to present the paper to you this evening. Just a few key points as part of the introduction. One is the purpose is to present the new draft damp, condensation and mould policy through to committee members this evening. And I am seeking the support of the approval of this condensation and mould policy moving forward. By way of introduction, I don't intend to go through it by point, but I think some of the key drivers behind this were obviously the shocking death of 2-year-old Awab Ishak in December 2020, and then the subsequent royal assent of the Social Housing Act, that received royal assent on the 20th of July. And along with that, we now have a piece of legislation referred to as Awab's Law, and Section 1.4 lists in a summary of what we will need to evidence adhering to that regulation. Section 2 of the report then leads onto a bit of an introduction as to what the Appendix 1, which is the policy, is all about, and how I've tried to structure it to give assurance not only to yourselves as members, but also subsequently through to our residents. And not necessarily just our 3 goes on to say it is a first step to promoting to our residents how we're going to address issues. I have tried to pitch the document in a way that it can be used by internal officers as well as those who are non-technical. But I think as it's developed, I think what came out of it was the need to also create a self-help booklet with pictorial reference, which is currently in train, working with colleagues here at Decorum to accompany this document through. I'll pause there. I've just noticed that my connection's not great, so I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. We did lose you momentarily, but I think we got everything. Did anybody have any questions on this policy, Councillor Banks?
Thank you, Mark. Hopefully, the bit that we missed hopefully isn't the bit that I'm about to ask you the question on. 2.2, where you've listed there, some of the landlord's responsibilities, and obviously I'm very supportive of that. But within our policy, will we be looking for any residents contribution, like you might have in some other sort of agreement where you've got, we will do this and you are expected to do that. Because I think some of the issues are poor behaviours that are leading to these issues around damp and mould. Although I'm not trying to shift the blame, I'm just curious to know if there'll be some degree of responsibility put on residents to take the advice that they're given or ventilate their homes better or what have you, obviously through education.
Thanks, It's a really good question and good observation. And I think for me, part of the, if I sort of wind back slightly, part of the driver of this legislation is not to blame residents and rather to work and educate with them. So I've purposely gone away from the you must approach. And what I wanted to do was to sort of pitch it very generally and then use the additional booklet and the pictorial reference to actually point out the do's and the don'ts, but in a more general educational way as opposed to pointing the finger. I've personally visited a couple of properties, high what I'd say high level properties, and I've knocked the door with officers, and the first thing we greeted with is, if you're telling me it's condensation, I'll shut the door in your face. Now, when you walk into the property, all the windows are closed, there's no heating on for whatever the reason may be, and then there's like things drying in the middle of in the living room, and this is just one example. So we do need to educate residents, but it needs to be done incrementally in a way that we can actually bring residents, with the support of elected members, obviously, along with us on that journey. So the policy gives a very high level and lends itself. I think if you refer to the amount of moisture that a family generates, I've started to bring that through in the pictorial supporting document to this will be more explicit around, a picture of somebody putting a saucepan lid on top of the saucepan, how to balance your heating with the ventilation of the property. And I think also a signpost back to the council with regards to those residents who are in fuel poverty who really can't afford to heat their properties, and how we can potentially work with them. In addition to this, we've also got some very small numbers, but there are some numbers being completed of our wave 2 decarbonisation, which addresses our solid wall properties, which are our coldest properties. So again, we can link the one to the other potentially. And I think, again, we just need to have the independence explicit without pointing the finger.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. I can see that Councillor Cox has popped up her hand on the screen. So if we go over to you, Councillor.
Hi everybody. Just looking at the report on 2.1 of the council's responsibilities. Just a question on the completion of any remedial work measures within a reasonable timescale. What do we class in as a reasonable timescale, especially for the elderly and disabled residents?
Thanks, Councillor. I mean, a reasonable timescale will be determined by the extent of the damp. So again, the policy, the reasonable timescale links more to about how quickly we're going to go out and assess that property. How quickly are we going to start to work on remediating the impact on remediating the root cause. And just to give you an example, if we attend a property and it's a simple case of education and working with the residents with regards to education around the root cause and a wash, we could do that within 2 working weeks. So that's 10 days. If it's more in-depth, that's going to involve core samples of the floors, core sample of the wall, more drainage surveys and things. The actual extent of the work can take a lot longer. So I think the reasonable timescale refers more to us about getting out, doing the surveys, seeking expert advice and guidance if we need to, and then coming up with a plan. And I think to date, the biggest problem that we've had with residents, irrespective of age or disability, etc., is that we go out, we do the survey, and then we never go back with a plan, and then we don't go back and review as well. So I think the key thing is that it's the same as anything to a certain extent. You can try what you think will work, but if you don't go back and see if it's worked, then the same residents will be coming back to say, well, I've still got damp and mould and all you've done is cover it over. And we are trying to, with the approach that we're adopting here, is get away from that. And actually on our more severe cases or cases that are higher priority because of disability or age, that we have a review process 2-3 months after to go back and say, actually, did it work? Did it work in the winter? The stuff that we've done in the summer, has it actually made an impact so the properties are drier and warmer and not suffering with damp? But unfortunately, I'm not able to give you a definitive timescale other than 7 days for severe cases of 2 days, sorry, with a severe case with regards to inspection, 7 days for all other cases, and then being able to articulate a plan and sticking to that plan and keeping the resident informed, which I think is the big hole that we currently have.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Whiteley.
Thank you. I've got several, if you don't mind, Chair. Well, thank you. I found the report very interesting. I particularly like the booklet, the coloured bit, which you're going to be sharing. And I do hope that we are going to be making sure that our residents see that, because it contains lots of information in there. One of my questions is any extra funding being allocated to expedite faster responses? Because now that, you know, with the very sad death of not just this child, but other children, which has been highlighted recently, it clearly puts even more pressure on the council as a responsible landlord to be seen to be responding effectively to that. So do we need to allocate extra funding to make sure that faster response happens, faster and more effective response?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. To answer the question, I actually brought a paper through to committee in December of last year, and that was actually going after it being through our SLT meetings to actually have allocated additional resources which were granted. So I've now got 2 additional surveyors, hence the reason why we can do the surveying a lot quicker. And I think, unfortunately, part of the revenue budget pressure that you see on the maintenance contract is as a result of the work that we're doing on damp and mould. So we do carry a cost pressure. So in a I suppose a 2-stage response to your question is, I've got additional resources, but it's driving additional repairs, which are putting additional cost pressures on the HRA.
So that funding is already set out in the budget for this. Good. With regard to you talked about various guidelines and timelines for getting stuff done, and it's all a little bit wishy-washy. And I know that you have to respond flexibly to the different scenarios that you're faced with, but I didn't see anything that said, you know, if you report this, we will respond within, you know, a certain time frame. And sometimes for residents, they need to have that clarity of when they can expect a response from us as a council. And I wondered if any thought had been given to actually tying that down more, and that would actually reassure tenants. And if we stick to those timelines, that can only give them confidence in the outcomes.
Yeah, thanks, Council. I mean, in response, what I've done is in section 2.1 of the actual policy, which is Appendix 1 to the report, the second bullet point does actually state, if classed as urgent, we'll respond and inspect your property within 48 hours, and all non-urgent works we inspected within 7 days. And again, I think I'll just play back to my earlier response to the question from Councillor Cox, is around the only point, or the only commitment I'd be comfortable to doing is actually getting surveyors out. Until we've actually surveyed the property, I wouldn't want to say that, okay, you've reported damp and mould, so we're going to send somebody out to wash that within 5 days. I think a surveyor needs to look at these properties and actually then come up with a plan, and then we can commit to timescales within the guidelines of our current repairs. All of those are open to exception, and all of those can be escalated. We do have, as part of the additional resources, we've re-procured 2 or 3 smaller contracts to seek local SMEs to support the Osborne contract. So we do have additional capacity built in, which again is leading to the cost pressure. But I think it's important to highlight that that's in response to the demand of damp and mould.
And my final one is just, I'm just curious, how many solid wall properties do we in fact have? you mentioned there was a particular problem, and I just wondered how many of them we have.
We've got circa of 75 properties that have been identified as solid wall. I don't actually have the number, but I'm happy to supply that as part of the minutes, not a problem.
And for the remediation of solid wall properties, what sort of financial measures would it attract to remediate those problems in that particular type of housing?
So I can give you a real time example, because we're currently working through some value engineering with those. At the moment, to do solid wall, EWI, which is the external wall insulation, solar panels on the top, all the remedial works that are enabling work, sorry, which are required to do this, is circa of about £60,000 per property.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, are we happy to approve? Should I take a vote, or is it you?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.
So it takes us to the action points. So there was the session on the housing points. Was that what was cancelled the other day?
Yes, service are in liaison with member support to rearrange that suitable date for members' diaries.
Thank you. And then the next one is the visit to the adventure playgrounds. I know there are some proposed dates on this one. Bless you. Have these been circulated, or which have been circulated? But I think there were some difficulties, and it's been asked if it can be done as a member development session, so all can attend. But obviously, I think then those sessions are evenings, which isn't really ideal for an adventure playground visit, because then it's either dark or full of young people, and then there's the extra safeguarding. And
Can't go on the zip line in the
exactly, everyone would see you.
Keep it going. Yeah.
But I think we're going to look into whether the individual managers at the certain playgrounds would be happy to arrange visits. If you want to pop emails.
So what should we propose, basically?
Yeah.
What should we have a vote of what
would work
everyone
best?
would like to do?
Well, I personally, if I may, Chair, I don't think there's any particular urgency, so I'd be quite happy to wait until the weather is warmer, less muddy, and then throw it out to all members, with a couple of dates to say the adventure playground would be available for visiting. I think it's out of curiosity, we're keen to see out of curiosity, the work that is done at the adventure playgrounds, but I don't think there's an urgency to it. And now it is dark and cold and muddy. Yeah, I think we could leave it till later in the agenda, on the works order.
So you want to propose that it's going as a member development,
Yeah.
but when it's lighter?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it'd be pointless going during the day. There'll be no one there. And I think of an evening, it'd probably be better if it was nicer, warmer weather, just so that you can fully see, everything in action and what the young people are, what offering they have.
I think there is also the option of, if the individual playground managers, I'm sure, would always be happy to welcome a counsellor into their groups if they got in contact, because obviously there will always be, we can't have a session that works for everyone. Yeah, I think that proposal's a good one.
That sounds better, to wait
Yeah,
for the better weather.
maybe we'll get a barbecue out of it.
I think if people did want to go ahead and arrange that, and I think we just need to be mindful that I think Bennet's End Adventure Playground's having some major rework, so that probably wouldn't be a good one to go to on short notice.
So is there anyone who urgently does want to see it? Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, no problem, perfect.
That brings us to there's the forward plan, which is anyone taking?
One question on that, Chair. In that for today was a report on people and communities that wasn't in the agenda today. Is that coming in next month's meeting, or are we not getting a people and communities report this quarter?
The Assistant Director for Services on annual leave currently, so I can take an action back to check and reply with Kaylee for the minutes.
Can have a look, see when they proposed it for. If they did come back with it. No. Yeah, I haven't been given a date for that. So yeah, I'll come back to you with that.
Did I see you? Yeah, that's right.
I'm not sure if this is the right, I don't know whether you've got any other business on this agenda, so forgive me if I'm in the wrong place. But there was a a training meeting that was cancelled at very short notice, and we've got the portfolio holder here. And I wondered how soon that's going to be rearranged, and actually can we make sure that that sort of thing doesn't happen in the future? It was a bit unfortunate.
I would like to apologise to a couple of people, especially here, who made the trip and it was cancelled. It was really unfortunate reasons, but yeah, that's something I would not like to do it again.
It was just alluded to though that it is in place and looking for another date for that to come.
And will that be sooner or later? Because, you know, clearly we have a lot of new members.
I have requested for the soonest possible date, but then again, I think the arrangement is not entirely up to me. It's based on other people's diary as well, so they need to find a date which people can really make it.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I've requested for sooner.
Lovely. That is everything. See everyone on the 6th of December. Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.